Shrijaya Singh. I teach English at CLATapult. In this video, we shall be dealing with writing styles in reading comprehension passages. This is often a question you would find in competitive exams like CLAT. What is writing style? Style, as the name suggests, deals with how the author chooses to embody his thoughts, his ideas into language. How the author basically chooses to express his thoughts in writing. Think about it as how the author is choosing to use language, use words and literary elements to convey his ideas on the passage. Writing styles can be primarily of these types. First, descriptive, narrative, expository, persuasive, analytical, and abstract. Let's begin with the first one, descriptive. In the descriptive style, the author would attempt to paint a picture of the person, place, thing, or whatever they are trying to deal with for the audience. Basically, the author will try to conjure up an image for the audience. So the author may even try to tell you how that person, place or thing would appeal to different senses. So what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like, what it feels like, and so on and so forth. So basically giving you the entire picture almost as though you are present there. So think about, these romantic poses that you would do in school. The river was flowing, the sun was rising, you could hear the birds chirping, the grass was soft and green, and so on and so forth. So doesn't that conjure up an image in your mind? So this is where the author is describing a particular scene, place, thing or person to you, to the audience. And the audience has a very clear picture as to what it appears like, as if they are there themselves. Please remember here though that the author is not trying to convince the audience of something or explain them something. They are merely giving you a description, oftentimes in a very detached manner. So this is a descriptive style of writing. Let's take an example. Say I go to a very fancy feast today evening, right? And it has many cuisines, food that I've not even heard of. It has a lot of exotic dishes. The decoration is exceptional and the decor is also looking very fancy and so on and so forth. It is attended by, say, thousands of people. The location is exquisite. So now think about when I write about this in my journal, in my diary, it is very likely to be descriptive, right? I will use the descriptive style of writing because I would want to remember every detail of what the feast was like. So if you think about that, then you would get an idea of what the descriptive writing style would look like. The next style that we are looking at is the narrative style of writing. Here, as the name suggests, you will be telling a story. Now, what is a story like? It has a beginning, a middle and an end. So ideally, the passages here should also have a beginning and a middle and an end. But alas, that's not the case. It's not as simplified for you, because if you could just see a story with a beginning, middle and an end, the answer of narrative style of writing would be obvious. But that is not the case, because the passages that you get in CLAT is not an entire literary piece that is picked for you. What they do is they pick up a part or an excerpt of a much larger literary piece of work and give a couple of paragraphs of it to you. CLAT consortium says that these passages are usually of 400 to 450 words. So now, when you have to decide which writing style is being used, you have to look at only these 450 words of the passage and decide which writing style is being used. So here, of course, a beginning, middle and end may not always be apparent because they've picked it from any part of the story, right? So if it's from the middle, it may not have the beginning and an ending very clearly. So now what you need to look for is plot development. If they are telling you a story, the story will move. There will be movement in the story. There will be movement in the plot. There will be development in the plot. It might also happen in the character doing something or the character interacting with other characters. All of it is amounting to the story moving forward. You are getting to know a little more about the story. The story might just move from here to here or from here to here. That is immaterial. What is important is that there needs to be some movement of the plot. You need to get to know a little more about the plot or the characters. In some way, some narration needs to happen, that you are getting to know a little more about the story. And this is where it differs from the descriptive style of writing, where, you just got to know what the setting is like, what it looks like, what it feels like. You're not getting to know anything beyond that. How, say, the elements of it also interact with each other is not something you really get to know in descriptive. But in narrative, all of it will interact with each other. Even if there are characters in the setting, they will interact with each other for the plot to move forward. And that is what you have to look for in narrative style of writing. An example of this could be, say, an anecdote, right? When you have an interesting incident in school and you come home and narrate it to your parents. So here, this anecdote, if you put it in passage form, it will have a narrative style of writing, because because you are telling your parents a story about that incident that happened in school. Autobiographies, again, broadly use a narrative style because they are telling the story of their lives. So fictional books are another example, but do realize if it's a 300, 400 page book or even shorter books, they are likely to have different styles of writing in the book. So let's take an autobiography. If they're trying to tell you how their parents had bought them a particular bicycle that they were very fond of, they might talk about that in using descriptive style of writing, just to give you all sort of vivid details about the bicycle. How, say, one time it got stolen becomes a story that they will tell you in the book. So that becomes narrative style again. Say many, many years later, if this were a book by a politician and they had taken a certain policy decision which they wanted to defend. Here, then, if they're trying to justify their actions, they might give you different arguments, different justifications. So that becomes the persuasive style, which we will be discussing later. So please remember that even in a larger work, there can be multiple styles involved. But you can broadly try to follow the examples I'm giving you and connect it to what I'm telling you about each style and look for elements of that in the passage that is given to you. Now let's come to the expository style of writing. This is also called factual writing style or informative writing style. Through putting these three names together, you must have understood that in this writing style, we will convey you lots and lots of information of how, what, when, where, basic details of something. So the author here is merely trying to inform the reader about something, give them basic details. Look at a newspaper report, right? So the reports that come out in the first, second, third page of the newspaper, all of them have details of what happened, where it happened, when it happened, what will be the next course of action. So all these basic pieces of information are given to you about something. Information is being dumped on you, usually in an objective and logical manner. So these newspaper reports are an example of expository style of writing or factual style of writing or informative style of writing. In fact, cookbooks, recipes, how-to books, how-to guides, how to change the tire of a car, they're all using expository styles of writing. This is the easiest of the lot. Next, let's do the persuasive style of writing. This also has another name, argumentative style of writing. As the name suggests here, the author will try to convince the readers of his own belief, bias, opinion. Here, remember that the author is coming in with a preconceived notion, with an idea, with a belief, and their objective is to convince the readers of it, the audience of it. So then they will give you different justifications, reasons, examples, all of which will support their belief, their opinion, in order to make you agree to them. So examples of this can be opinion editorial pieces in the newspaper, right? Op-ed columns, wherein the author tends to have an opinion of their own, and then they will give justifications, arguments to substantiate their stance. And through this, they are attempting to convince the audience, the readers, to agree with them, with their belief. Another example is election speeches, wherein a political candidate will give you a lot of reasons to, say, agree with his belief or her belief that, say, the ruling party is not doing a good job, for example. Letters of recommendation. You know how the previous employer will often give a letter of recommendation for, say, the employee that's moving to a different job so as to convince the new potential employer to hire them. That's also an example of persuasive style of writing, because you are giving the new employer reasons like this employee was sincere, was intelligent, was hardworking, so as to encourage, so as to persuade the potential employer to hire that person. Another example are advertisements. In advertisements, again, the company is trying to convince you that their product is worth buying, that you must buy their product. So here also they are using the persuasive style of writing. Now we are discussing the analytical writing style. You remember in the persuasive style of writing, I told you that the author comes in with a preconceived notion, as opposed to persuasive style, as opposed to coming in with a preconceived notion. In the analytical style, the author will come in unbiased, neutral, without any opinion. Taking a neutral stance, they will attempt to evaluate the pros and cons of something, of whatever they're discussing, the subject matter. They will begin from an absolutely unbiased standpoint, discussing the pros and cons of something. In the process of this, by the end of the passage, they might come to a reasoned conclusion on the basis of the pros and cons they've discussed. This is different from the persuasive style of writing, wherein you can see the apparent bias that the author started writing the passage with. So while in persuasive style, the objective had been to convince the readers of the preconceived notion that the author themselves had, here In the analytical style, the author comes in with a neutral stance, trying to just evaluate the pros and cons of something and give a reasoned conclusion to the audience. A classic example to differentiate between the two would be a movie promotion uses persuasive style, because there, say, the actors are trying to convince you to come watch their movie by, giving you different reasons. We've acted the best. It is the director's magnum opus. It has great digital effects and so on and so forth. As opposed to, say, a movie review, which is analytical, wherein the reviewer, the critique, will look at all different elements of the cinema, of the movie, and evaluate it on the basis of that, and then come to a conclusion as to whether it was worth watching or not, and so on and so forth. So that's the analytical style of writing. Now we come to the last writing style that we'll be discussing today, which is the abstract style of writing. Some people consider it to be a writing style, others don't. In my opinion, I don't think it should be considered a writing style, because I feel that it's more of a subject area, because abstract style passages, speaking broadly, deals with simply philosophical passages, and in my opinion, these should be considered a subject area in and of itself, and something can deal with abstract ideas and still fall into any of the other 5 categories, depending on whether they are being informative about it or they are siding with one particular philosophical belief and trying to make the audience agree with it, in which case it becomes persuasive. However, certain sources consider abstract writing style to be a writing style, so we're discussing it here just in case in the exam also it is considered one. We don't want you to feel thrown off. That brings us to the end of writing styles. Keep practicing. All the best. Thank you.